In today's lesson, we are going to talk about the subtraction of fractions. So that's what we're going to do. And in this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can do that. And let's take a look. Let's start with a whole one. I have one whole, and I'm going to take away a half. Now, what always helps is to make a visual representation of this situation. So I've got a whole. Let's say this is a pie. So I've got one pie, and then somebody asks me for half of the pie. So I'm just going to make a half here. This is a semicircle. This is a half. So I have a whole pie. I'm taking away half of the pie, and what I have left is obviously the other half. Now this is exactly what's happening here as well. One, take away the half. What I have left is one half. Now this whole one, I can also write it down as, let me just use my cloth here. I can also write it down as 2 over 2. From the two parts that the pie is divided in, I have both of them. 2 over 2. Now I'm going to take one of those parts away. So a half. I'm going to take one of those parts away. So 2 minus 1 equals 1. Yeah, so I have a half left. Now what's important to note here is that just with addition, you have the same rule for subtraction. You can only subtract fractions from each other when the denominator is the same. Yeah, so they have to be divided in the same pieces. If that is not the case, you have to make them the same. So we talked about that in addition, how you can do that. Also remember that because it's still, the pie is still divided into halves. That doesn't change. So the denominator also doesn't change. So when you're adding or subtracting and the denominator is the same, you don't change it. Okay, so the denominator stays the same, which is actually really nice because it means you can just already write down this 2. You don't have to think about that. Okay, let's make it a little bit more complicated. So this is 1, take away a half, and what you have is a half. But let's try it out with another fraction. Let's say I have a whole 1, and I'm taking away 5 over, let's say 7. So how can I do this? Now, the important thing here is that I need to write down this whole one as a fraction. And to do that, I want to write it down as a fraction that has the same denominator as the fraction that I'm wanting to take from the whole number. So in this case, it's a 7. So my denominator is here is 7 as well. Now remember, a whole one means in this case it's 7 over 7 because from the 7 parts, or the 7 parts that the number consists out of, I have all 7 because I have a whole one. 7 divided by 7 equals 1. Okay? So instead of writing this as a whole one, I'm going to write it down as a fraction. So I'm going to write it down as 7 over 7. Yeah? Now, from the 7 parts, I have all 7. My numerator is 7. Minus, but now somebody comes by and says, I want 5 of those. So let's say I've got, of my 7 pens, or markers, let's say markers, from the 7 markers, I have all 7. Somebody comes by, takes 5 of them. So now, from the 7 markers that I used to have, I have 2 left. Yeah, so 7 minus 5 equals 2. Yeah, so the total number is still 7 markers. That doesn't change. The denominator doesn't change. But I now have 5 less. So I used to have 7 minus 5, and now I have 2. But what do you do when I want to subtract? So I'm going to make it a little bit more difficult. I'm just going to go a step up here. Oh, let's see if the camera can still focus. What happens when I have more than 1? So let's say I have 3, and I'm taking away, let's say 4 over 5. So what happens now? Well, what we want to do in order to do the sum, we want to change the 3 whole ones into a mixed number. So we want to show whole ones and we want to show a fraction in this number. Now, the denominator here is 5, right? So I just want to have one whole one and write it down as a fraction with the denominator 5. So one whole one equals 5 over 5. In other words, 3 whole ones is the same as 2 whole ones and 5 over 5. So let's try to write it down like that here. So I'm just going to erase this 3. And I'm going to write it down as a mixed number. So I have 2 whole ones and 5/5. Then, and this again is really nice about fractions, we know that the whole ones, these 2 are not going to change. Because there are no whole ones here. I don't have to take anything away. So I can just write down the 2 here. That's a given. Then I want to write down the fraction. Now we already know the denominator of the fraction because they're both 5. So the denominator doesn't have to change. So I'm just going to write down the 5 here. I already know that. So the only actual math that I have to do here is 5 take away 4. So my answer is 2, 1/5. Okay, that's a lesson today on how to take away a fraction from a whole number.